Our video here is going to take us through what we're going to call like terms. This is going to be an algebraic concept that we're going to use quite a bit this year, so it's something that we have to work with and understand, and it's going to set us up for some of the other stuff that we're going to do in this section. So this is a pretty key video. Even though we may not do worksheets on it or something like that, it's going to be a part of the problems that you're going to be involved with. So some of the terms that we're going to talk about and you're going to hear me say in class, one is terms. This is parts of the problems, and they're separated by a positive or negative. So that plus sign or negative sign, remember we called those separators when we were doing the order of operation process. Some examples would be a 4x plus 2. There's two terms in this example because this is separating them. We have 3x squared plus 2x plus 5. So there's three terms in that part. Our next term is coefficient. This is the number that is in front of the letter. When you have a number next to a letter, it shows multiplication. So our example would be 3x. Our coefficient would be 3. 2x squared, our coefficient is 2. 4y, our coefficient is 4. 3x plus 2, there's again two terms to go back to the top term. Here's our coefficient of 3. Our back one is a constant, is what we call it. It'll never change. So a constant is something that will never change, and that's what only a whole number or a counting number or an integer is. It's a constant. Our next one is like terms, terms that are identical, not considering the coefficient and the signs that are in front of them. Think of apples and oranges, bananas. You can't combine apples and oranges. If I have 5 bananas and 5 oranges, I don't have 10. I have 5 apples and 5 oranges, or the example. So they have to be identical, and we're looking for the letter, the variable that's in the problem. So our example would be 4x and x. These are like terms. It doesn't matter what the coefficient is here of 4 and 1, but it's x is the dominating factor. So 2 and 4, well, these are two constants, so they are like terms, so we can combine them. 3x squared and 2x squared, those are like terms. So you want to be able to look at those and say, is the letter exactly the same, and does it have the power? So if I were to cover this up and say just 3x squared and 2x, you wouldn't have like terms here. You would have 2x's here and only 1 here. But if I bring that square back, you have like terms in this case. So that's a little tricky part, but that's how we're going to combine some of this stuff as we go through this section. All right, some other concept part of this that is tricky as you go through it is when we have a single letter. It's a variable with no coefficient, but it's no coefficient that's showing. So we say x, but we say 1x. There's 1x here. But we don't put the 1 in front, so we assume that there's a 1 in here as I've written it here, or we write it with the word, but generally we look at it this way. But in algebra, you'll never see a 1 in front of that. So here we have a negative y. So we say negative y or negative 1y because there's, again, one of each of those. So it's just 1, but we don't put the number there. So we, again, assume that the number is in front. So this part is very tricky when you start looking at this because we're going to want to put a 1 in there. We don't want to do that. At the beginning, yes, that's fine, but let's work our way out of that part. So at this point, I'm going to ask you a couple questions on the form. Underneath the video, this is where you're going to put your answers. So these are the question numbers that relate to these parts of the videos. So my question is, what is the coefficient? Question 1, question 2, question 3. And again, you'll answer the questions on the form under the video. My other two questions here is, how many terms do you have? So again, I'm giving you this, question 4, question 5. And again, I want you to answer that on the form at the bottom of the sheet or of the video. All right, so let's get to combining like terms. But hang on, I forgot something real quick. Sorry about that. All right, so let's look at combining like terms. So there's three things that we want to take a look at as we go through this. The first one is we want to look for the letters that are the same. We're going to combine the coefficients of the letters that are the same, or the variables, and the letters or the variables are going to come with us. So as we look at some of these, they're going to be long problems. They're not difficult as long as you can identify your like terms. That's why I had to go get my marker. So we want to identify what are the like terms in this. So our first one is 3x plus 2 plus 4x plus 5 plus 6. So my like terms, and I'm going to highlight this differently. Here's a like term, and then these two, or actually three, whoops. Those are like terms. So I'm just going to combine these two here, and I'm going to combine these three. So if I combine these, I'm taking and again combining the coefficient. 3 plus 4 is 7. The letter comes with. 2 plus 5 plus 6 gives me 13. So this is my simplified answer. And I'm going from a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-term expression to only a 2-term expression once I simplify it. My next example is 4x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 2x squared plus 4. So again, I'm going to identify my like terms by simply underlining them a different amount each time that I see them. You can do anything you want, I don't care. So I'm going to take 4x squared, 2x squared, but I have a negative 2x squared, so I have 4 to negative 2 gives me 2x squared. I have a 2x, a negative 3x, that combines to be a negative x, and there again is that 1 that we talked about on the last slide. And then we just have a 4 at the end. So remember, x squared and x are not like terms. Okay? So here's my last problem. I'm not going to read it out to you because you can pause the video and look at it. But if I identify my like terms, I'm going to identify all my y's, then my x's, and then my constants. Once I do that, now I combine all of the y's. I get 8y. I combine all of the x's. I get 3x. And I bring my constant by itself. And again, we're taking the sign that's in front of the number. So when you add or subtract like terms, you must have the same variable. The positive or negative tells us whether we are adding or subtracting the coefficients. The letters just come for the ride, but must be exactly the same. Couple more. So again, here's my problem. I am again going to identify my like terms. And I'm going to combine the ones that are like by the way I underline them. So my x's, I'd have a negative 3x squared, because that's the only one that's there. I have a negative 4x with all my x's. And I have a 2 y's, which combine to be a positive y. So customary in math, algebra, that the higher power goes first, or the letters go in alphabetical order. If it's just the letter, don't put a number 1 in front of it. Just leave it as the letter. So our last one here, again, I'm going to underline and identify my like terms. So I identified all of my x's. There's my y's. Here's my constants. And if you notice, my y is not in my answer because I have a negative y and a negative 3y and a positive 3y. So those two would go to 0. Anything times 0 is just 0. So that is why that goes to and doesn't be a part of my answer in that one. So some keys to this. Look at the variables. Must be exact. Combine the numbers regarding the signs. Don't put the 1 in front of the letter or the variable. Just put the variable, or if there's a negative, put that in front also. Identify your like terms by some method, whether you underline them, circle them, put it in a square, triangle, however you want to do that. And 5, make sure you organize the answer. So the last thing I have for you is one last problem. Board out of the way. So I want you to put your answer in the video or in the form below. Here is your question. You get to supply the answer.